Hi, everyone. Welcome to EdTech Camp on Air 2019. I am Hannah Wolfstadt, and I am here for PD in your PJs, wearing my PJs. Is it Friday yet, talk? So I am presenting today about using Google Forms and DocAppender for small group instruction. So I'm just going to switch on over my screen and pull up the PowerPoint presentation. So I'm just going to switch that over. All right. So welcome to using Google Forms and DocAppender to document small group learning. If needed, you can always feel free to contact me throughout the presentation or after. My email address, hannah.wolfstadt@yrdsb.ca, or on Twitter @Ms. Wolfstadt. So Google Forms is a way to document student learning instead of doing paper pencil documentation. I like to use it for small group learning, for my guided math and my guided reading. The great thing about it is that changes are automatically saved as you work, and DocAppender is an add-on that I will explain a little bit later on. And it's wonderful because it's used to help track progress for individual students. So it's great when it's report card time or communication of learning in the kindergarten world. I just open up the document for the particular student that I'm working on, and I can see all of the small group learning sessions that I would have had with this student, and I can use that to create my comments. So as I mentioned, DocAppender is an add-on for Google Forms, which again, I will get into a little bit more detail later, but it basically pushes data from the form into a specific Google Doc for that child. So it's useful for each child has their own document. And the great thing about it is when you're setting up your form using DocAppender, you don't need to list all of your students' names. Through DocAppender, it will populate all of the possible options of the students you have based on some little work that you do beforehand to set that up. So we'll get into that in a little bit later. One thing to keep in mind, if you're doing student name as the first question, you want to have it as a checkbox, a multiple choice question, or a list question, which again, we'll get into in a couple of slides. So when you are making your Google form, some possible questions to include really depend on what you're using the form for. So you want to make it as personal for you and as simple as you as possible. And keep in mind that you can always go back and edit the form if needed. So here are a few possible questions that you may include if you're working on a guided reading form, a guided writing form, or a guided math form. Obviously, the first question would probably you would want it to be student or student name so that you know which student you're focusing on. And then again, based on whatever your form is about, your questions will differ. So for example, if you're doing a guided reading form, which I will show you a little bit later on, you might want to have the title of the book, the level, perhaps the sight words the student's working on. I personally like having a little list checkbox of things that I'm working on with the student. So one student may be working on, one-to-one finger pointing because I work with kindergarten students. Another one may be focusing on fluency. So it depends on where the student is at. And then I have a comment box where I type in my comments, my observations, same thing as if you were to handwrite your notes, and then a box for next steps. That's mine for guided reading. Guided writing may differ. Same for guided math. One that I didn't include on here, which I can show you a sample of later, is I just have a simple conversations form. So this one is I don't use DocAppender for, but I just simply list all the students' names, and I have a box for what is the context of the conversation, and then whatever the student says. And I find this really useful if a kid or a student says a wonderful quote that I may not need to do a whole documentation piece on, or I may not want to just write it on a sticky. I want to have it online somewhere. I select the student in the form, quickly type in what the student says, and submit the form. And then, again, come report card time, I open up the spreadsheet with all of the responses, and I can just literally copy and paste whatever the student said into the report card. Obviously giving some background knowledge or context, but just a really quick, easy form. So it could be as simple as that, as just one kind of comment observation box. Okay, so I've mentioned a few kind of types of questions. So when you are creating a form, there are different options of the type of question that you may want to include. So a short answer and a paragraph are very similar. They're basically both if you want to have, some sort of descriptive written answer. The only difference is that a short answer is a box where it's all in one line, and a paragraph is a little bit of more of a longer answer text that will wrap, and the box size will increase as you're typing. So I personally, when I'm using it for guided reading and guided math, I use the paragraph so that it's a little bit of a longer answer text box. Multiple choice, exactly what it says. You have options available. The good thing about it is that there's the option for an other option where the person who's filling out the form, so say it's yourself, you can have the option to fill in what that other option would be. Checkboxes, very similar to multiple choice. The good thing about this is that you can select more than one option at a time. So for example, if you're reading with 2 students and you choose to have one form for the both of them, you can check off both names as you're completing that form. Drop down, again, similar to multiple choice, but in this case, you're click the drop down on the right-hand side to see the list of options, and then a linear scale. So it's like a rating scale that you might want to rate, for example, the fluency that the student is reading with, or the expression, or if you're doing a math form, maybe the description or the rating scale of how the student answered that question. The other thing is within multiple choice, you have the option to create a multiple choice grid question. So I can show you that when we're creating a simple form soon, which takes us to our next point, how to create a basic Google form. So these are the steps. I am actually going to go and kind of create a form with you so that you can see all of these steps. You're going to start it through your My Drive page, creating a Google form. We'll give it a title. We'll add some questions, choosing the question type that we want, deciding if we want the question to be required or not, adding more questions, and then once it's done, we'll preview the form so that we can see it in the actual live form. The other good thing about Google Forms is that we can change the banner or the theme at the top so that we can have some different colors and a picture at the top, and I really like this. My guided math form has one theme, whereas my guided reading form has another theme. So if I'm quickly on my computer and I'm maybe not paying attention and I'm on a form, I can use the banner at the top to remind myself which form I'm in. So I'm gonna just escape for a second and go into My Drive. So we're now going to create a form. So I'm going to go up here to New, and I'm going to go into More, Google Forms. And so it's going to open up in a new tab. And right at the top here, or at the top left, it says Untitled Forms. This is where I'm going to give it the title. So I'm going to choose to call it, for the purpose of this, Guided Reading, Guided Reading Test. And then here is the first question. So it's automatically going to multiple choice. You can choose whatever you want. So I'm going to choose it as checkbox. I'm going to title it name, and I'm just going to leave it like this for now because I'm going to come back to it after when we do the DocAppender part. So this little plus button on the right-hand side here is add a question. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to make my next question. So maybe I want it to be the title of book and level. And I want this as a short answer because I want to be able to type the text or the title of the text in here. And this is going to be a required question because I want to make it mandatory. That means if I go to submit the form and I have not answered this question yet, it will not let me submit the form. And when we go into the live form, the way that we know if a question is required or not, it will have a little red star beside it. So we'll see that when we go to our live form. I'm going to add another question, and I'm going to title it Focus. And I'm going to make this a checkbox option so that I have the option to choose more than one thing. And I'm going to choose what is the focus for the student. So maybe it's one-to-one correspondence and tracking correspondence. I'm going to click enter. It's going to take me down to the next option. The next option, maybe we're working on directionality, knowing that we read from left to right. Maybe another student is working on making attempts at words, recognizing sight words, fluency, expression, comprehension, making sure we understand the story. I'm going to leave it at that just for the purposes of this test. And again, I want this to be a required question. If I'm working on it and I decide I don't want this question anymore, I can simply click the trash can, which would delete the question, or this kind of two-page icon, which means I would duplicate the question. Again, I'm going to add one more question. I'm going to make it, oops, next steps. Again, I want this to be required, and I want it to be in paragraph form so that I can type the student's next steps. And the last question I want to add is comment. So my general comments about how they're reading. Whoops. Again, I want it to be paragraph format. And I want it to be required. I have just finished my form. However, I realized that I would prefer my comments to be before my next step. So I want to reorder some of my questions right now. All I'm going to do is these little dots up here. I'm going to click on them and drag the comment question up to above next steps. And I've just reordered it right now. So for now, aside from the name question at the top, my form is ready to go. So if I go up here, this is a little preview button to make it the live form. Before I do that though, I want to play around with my theme at the top. So this little color palette up here is where I could customize the theme. So I'm going to click on that. And I can choose a header. That means in this purple area, I can choose an image to keep up there. So I'm going to choose an image. And I can either upload a photo from my own computer, or I can choose from the themes and header pictures that Google Drive provides us with. So I'm going to choose, it's my guided reading form. I like this one with a book. And I'm going to click select. And now at the top of my form, that's my header, my theme picture. And I'm going to change the color over here so that the background here has changed a little bit. I can also change the font style if I so choose, but I like it as is, so I'm going to click X over here. And I'm going to view my form now. Again, it's not complete because I do want to go back to change this name using DocAppender, but we'll get to that in a moment. So I'm going to preview the live form, and this is what the form will look like when I'm ready to actually use it. So you can see whatever questions have a red asterisk beside it, that means that it's a required question. So right now, all of my questions are required, again, except for that name option at the top. So we've created a simple form. I'm going to go back to that PowerPoint presentation to just go through a few more slides before we get to DocAppender. I will come to this responses. I'm going to come back to this next slide in a moment. I'm going to skip to this editing a form slide. So as mentioned, when we're editing a question, all we have to do is click on the question and make our changes. And if we want to reorder the question, all we do is we click on the two horizontal lines. It was actually, I should change that. It was those two rows of three dots at the top, and simply drag and drop the question wherever we want it. We're going to go back in a moment talking about what a spreadsheet is. But basically, once we've submitted the form, if we use DocAppender, we're able to have an individual document for each student with their responses, but we can also open up our responses in a spreadsheet, which is basically a Google Sheet, which I'll go back to that in a moment. Once we have opened and created a spreadsheet, if we want to go back and edit a form, that will not affect the responses that we have previously collected. So if we want to edit the form, we can go ahead and do that however we wish. And then all we would have to do is delete the spreadsheet that we've opened previously. It will not delete all of the responses. And then we would just open a new spreadsheet again, which I will show you how to do in a moment. And that will update the spreadsheet based on the new form. Again, keeping all of the current, future, and previous responses. So going back one slide to responses from a Google form, I will take you out of this in a minute and go back to the form that I just created with you and show you how we can view the responses in the simplest way. And the easiest way is through a spreadsheet. And that Google spreadsheet will have all of the responses that you collect in the form. So I'm going to go back over here to our new form. Sorry, this was our live form. I'm going to go back here. And at the top here, it says questions. This is when we're working in our form, creating it. If I click over here in responses, this little green icon here with the plus sign on it is the spreadsheet. So I'm going to click on this. And again, this is going to open. It's going to tell me that I want to create a new spreadsheet. It automatically gives the title of the spreadsheet, the title of the form, which was guided reading test, and in brackets, it says responses. So I'm going to click create because I want to create this spreadsheet. It's going to open up in a new tab. And all the responses I collect will populate in this new spreadsheet. And the great thing about it is that it automatically timestamps. It automatically gives the date and time that you submitted that form. So I don't have to have a question in my form of the date or the time that I'm working with a student. It's automatically populated, which I love. So that's kind of the basics of how to create a form. I'm going to talk now about DocAppender, which is really helpful, again, when you're working with small groups and individual students so that you can track their progress. So again, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint presentation. Sorry, I know it's a lot of back and forth. Here are the steps of how to use DocAppender. So I'm just going to go through them quickly before I actually show you what to do. So how to use DocAppender. And this is, the first few steps are actually something that we could have done before we created the form. I kind of like call it the front load or backload, however you like to call it. The backload work that we would need to do before we create that simple form. So I will go back and into my drive, we're going to create a folder that will house documents, blank documents to start for all of the students in my class. Within that folder, again, we'll create all the documents, and I like to simply label the document with the students' names. Just first name, you can choose to do last names if you would like as well. And then once we've done that, we'll go back to our form and use the DocAppender add-on to actually populate that name question that I had created beforehand. So I'm going to take you out of this again and go into my drive. So this is my drive. I'm going to create a folder, like I said, new folder. In this case, I'm just going to call it guided reading test, just for the purposes of this. And I'm going to go into this folder, and I'm going to create documents for all of my students. For the purpose of this time, I'm just going to create 5 documents, imagining that I have a class of 5 students, which would be a dream. So I'm going to right-click and open up Google Doc. I'm going to title it with my student's name, which I will call it, my first student will be Hannah. Waiting for this to load. Okay, Sorry, it's being a little slow. Okay. So we're going to title it Hannah. Okay, and I'm going to exit out of that. I'm going to create another folder, sorry, another document with another student. I'm going to open up a few, just it's being a little slow right now. So I'm going to open a few at the same time so we can name them all. 1, 2, 3, 4, and one more, 5. Okay. I'm going to name all them with students' names. So my first student was Hannah. My second student is going to be Falguni. Sorry, again, it's being, whoops, a little bit slow. Falguni. Okay. My next one is going to be Jen. Jen. My next one is going to be sorry, it's being very slow. My next student is Miles. And my last one is Axel. Okay, so I have my 5 students, dream class. I'm going to exit these documents. I don't need them right now. I don't like having so many tabs open. Okay, so in this folder that's going to house all the documents for all my students, I have those documents. I'm going to go back to my form in the editable version, not the live form. And I'm going to go back to this name question. So up here at the top, I'm going to click on add-ons. It's this little puzzle piece. I already have the DocAppender add-on. If you didn't have it, all you would need to do is click add-ons, is Google DocAppender and download that add-on and add it to your Google Drive. So I click DocAppender. I'm now going to click Open Sidebar. And this little sidebar is going to open on the right side. And the first step is that I need to choose the target document folder, which is basically that folder that I just created. So I'm going to pick from my drive because I've already created that folder. You can create it new in this step, but it's easier to do the front work and have previously created it. So I'm going to pick from drive. And all my folders will show up here. And I'm going to select the one I want. It happens to come up right away. If I had a lot of folders and I couldn't find it, I could simply search for it in the search bar up here. But I'm going to click on the guided reading test folder. It's important that you do a single click and not a double click, because the double click will take you into the folder, which is not what you want. You just want to select that folder and click select. Now I'm going to click next to go to step 2. Over here it says choose the question that I want. And again, for DocAppender, it needs to be a multiple choice question, a list question, or a checkbox question. So I'm going to select the question. Sorry, I have to refresh the list here. Now I'm going to select the question, name. The reason that all my questions don't appear here is because these two, the name question and the focus question, are the only ones that are either multiple choice, list, or checkbox. So I'm going to choose name because that's the question that I want to populate. And I'm going to click Save and populate the selected question. So basically, all those documents that I created for those 5 students before, that's going to populate the choice of names I have here. So once I've done that, you can see it's already populated them, my class of 5 students. Their names have all populated. So I'm now going to click Next. And I'm going to choose which of these questions, so all the questions now appear, including the timestamp, which is automatic. Which ones do I want in the target document? I want all of them in my case. So I want the time to be in my document, the name, the title, the focus, the comments, and next step. And now down here in step 4, you can choose the format that you want it to look like in the document. So I personally like separate vertical tables. And when, again, I'll show you an example. Once I've completed the form, in each document, it's going to show up in separate vertical tables. So I'm going to click Enable now. So it is ready to go. Once I've done that, I can simply click the X up here in the sidebar. So now my form is ready to go. My student's name has been automatically populated. I'm ready to use this form. So we're going to do a little sample. I'm going to click the preview button up here. I'm going to close this other one that I had. And now I'm ready to use my form. So I am reading today with Axel. So I'm going to choose Axel. I'm going to write that we're reading the book Red Puppy, which is a level 4 book. Axel is focusing on making attempts at words. And I choose he's also working on fluency. That's another thing we're working on. I'm reading with him. I'm going to say that he was able to solve the word looking on his own. He noticed look and ing and whoops, and was able to blend it together to read looking. He read fast and it sounded phrased. Okay, I'm ready to submit. We can see now that I was not able to submit because I did not fill in the next steps box, which is a required question. So it would not let me submit. So now I'm going to click next steps is continue to find word parts in unknown words, e.g. go, ing, in, going. So that's his next steps. Now I can submit. So I have submitted that. If I want to work with another student right away, I can simply click submit another response and it would reopen that form. So I'm going to go back to the form that I can edit. And we can look at that. It now shows us that we've done one, I've submitted one response. So I'm going to click on this and open up that spreadsheet again so that I can see the data. And again, here is the questions for my form in that top row. And here is all the information I've completed and I filled in. This is a great way to look at it, but DocAppender really helps us so that I can just look specifically at Axel's work. So if I go to guided reading back up here to that folder, and I open Axel's document, now I'm able to see all that information from that form in one spot for Axel. Sorry, a little slow to open up. And here shows up all the information for Axel. And so this is awesome because as I continue to use the form and do more guided reading sessions with each student, I can simply scroll through his document and all the other responses that I submit will show up in separate tables like this. So I'm going to just show you the form that I'm currently using this year with my students. Again, very similar to the one we created, just a little bit more detailed. This is the guided reading form that I use with my students. So I'm going to put it into the live form. As you can see, I've chosen a different theme picture at the top, still related to reading for me. I have the students' names. Oh. Okay, something happened to this form because it should not just be like this. I think I may have, I'm gonna go back to here. Okay, so I think I changed something before, so there's a little bit of an error. I'm going to show you my math form instead. I need to go back and edit that apparently. So this is my math form. Again, at the top I have a theme related to math. Student's name, which is a required question. The focus or activity that I'm working on with the students, which is required. The goal, which is not a required question because sometimes I don't include that. A box for my observations, comments, a box for my next steps, and then if I've chosen to include a picture, I will have a little checkbox there to remind me that I have a picture to include. I'm going to go over and just show you one student, quickly scroll through. This is a student in my class, his guided reading note. So you can see this is the first response I completed with him. And as I scroll down, here are all of the responses from all the forms I've completed with him. So when I worked on report cards, I had this tab open when I was working on Alex's report card, and I was able to scroll through and see all of the progress and write my comments based on the responses in this. So it's really great because I had all of my responses, all of my information in one spot. The last thing I wanted to show you was that conversations form that I mentioned that simply has, again, students' names. I did not use DocAppender for this. It has students' names, and it has a question that has the context of the conversation. So for example, if I want to say, you know, we're having a whole group discussion about a read aloud maybe, and then whatever quote or comment that the students made that I really want to capture, I would type in here. And then if there's anything else to mention, I would include it here. And so over here, this is the spreadsheet for that conversations form. Again, I haven't used it a ton because I use other forms of documentation such as Edsby that my school is using this year, my partner and I in kindergarten classroom are using. But this is a great simple way to track data using Google Forms. So I'm going to go back to my original presentation. So I know I didn't fully read through all the steps here, but I showed it to you in live form. So that was explaining how to use DocAppender, which I showed you. And again, this is just a sample guided reading form from my class. And again, this is what it should have looked like, but I need to go back and edit because I think I accidentally deleted some of my form. But the form would have the book title, the level, sight words, the focus, again, which is a checkbox, and then spot for short answer, or sorry, long answer for my comments and my next steps. So that's a very simple, quick way of how to create a Google form and use DocAppender. So happy documenting. You can see here I'm doing some small group reading in these two pictures with my computer open, and small group math, again, with my computer open over here. Please feel free to email me or contact me if you have any questions. My email address is there, as well as my Twitter. I'm always around, so I hope this was helpful, and I hope you have learned some new things about documenting, especially for small group instruction. If you have any questions, reach out to me. If you're going to any other sessions or listening to any other sessions today for EdTech Camp, I really hope you enjoy it, and good luck and have a great Sunday. Thanks, everyone.